So the 2020 census is coming out, and the enumeration date is April 1st. Yeah, April Fool's Day. In any case, let's talk about the 2020 census and all of the things you need to know about it. So welcome to Family History Fanatics. My name is Devin Noel Lee, and we love live chat. That's why we love the community we have going on, and you're going to see a lot of the community information going on, but I'm actually going to change to this view for the introduction. So let's talk 2020 census. So the 2020 census, in order to understand how important it is, especially if you're not from the United States, it is the enumeration of the people. So it's an accounting of the people. And this is how a lot of representation in the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate are allocated, as well as this is where we get all of our statistics of what's going on in the country. And the census is not anything new, but there have been some changes I want to talk about. And if you haven't filled your census out yet, let's talk about some of the things that I'm happy about and some questions you might have. So the 2020 census, is in a long line of history. So who knows when the first U.S. census was taken? I wonder, how smart are you guys? Actually, you're all pretty smart. But the first census in the United States was tallied in 1790. That's right. So very, very early in the history of the United States, the country went around and started counting the people. Now, Canadians, they have census records. So does British. There's some in Germany. There's some in Mexico and a few other places. Good job, June. You got it. 1790, that's when the first U.S. census was taken. And it was ordered by the actual Constitution that every person is counted. So let's take a look back at the census of the past, and let's go forward to what's going on with the 2020 census. So in the 1790 census, a tally was taken, but we didn't quite understand the importance of preserving records. So although everybody was counted in 1790, a number of states do not have their surviving 1790 census. What's also fascinating about the 1790 census is there was not a lot of information on this record. You notice there's 2 columns of people there and just a few tallies based on the populations that they wanted to get counted. But over time, the census records changed. So here we have 1820. Now, you don't have 2 people on a line. You have 1 person for a whole line across the page. And in some census records, there's 2 pages of content. It is a myth that no Black people were included in census records. Free Black people as early as 1820 were counted on the census records, and there might also have been free Black people before that. So never think just because you have Black skin that you do not have any ancestors in those early census records. You might be surprised what you find. Now, some other things that are pretty fascinating about these census records is as you move forward in time, the questions asked became more robust. And as a genealogist, this is awesome. I love being able to track my ancestors and get their biographical data when other records don't exist. You should probably know that civil records, birth, marriage, and death, in many places really didn't take hold until the 19-teens. And so the census records are a fabulous entry-level record collection for people to start tracing their ancestors. Now in 1850, things started changing, and we love, as genealogists, the 1850 census because every person's name is now listed. Well, with the exceptions of slaves at this time period. But every person in a household began to be listed by names rather than just the head of household and some tally marks. The other things they started to ask were additional biographical information so that we could allocate resources and track what's happening in the country. But as a genealogist, some of the things that I absolutely love is when we know where somebody came from. So we know where somebody was born, where their parents born, and oh yes, even though it's controversial in 2020, citizenship. Where were they from? If they're from a foreign country, have they naturalized? Have they become a citizen? Why do we care? Because genealogists know that if they answer yes to that question, it means more records. It means more records, and those records might point us back to the home country. So, that's a brief history of the census records. You're going to have to look in the description for links to other census-related videos that we have on this channel. But let's talk. All right, you guys in the chat, put on your thinking cap. Who is supposed to be counted in a census? In the United States, who are we supposed to be counting? Let me go ahead and give a shout out to those who have joined us before we answer these questions. So June is from New Hampshire. Glad you're here. Shane Allen from Australia. Now tell us, you're from Australia and you're tuning in about census records. What kind of census records do you have down there in Australia? That's a new to me area. Sabine from Mississippi, and she has done her census record. Greg is from Ontario. Ontario has census records. And John, you're here. It was so brief, you were shocked. Yes, agreed. Okay, so Tommy Bush, you have the almost correct answer. Let's explain. So, everyone should be counted, but there's a small caveat. You're supposed to be counted as of April 1st. So if you filled out a census record and you're pregnant, which I hope many of you are right now who filled out your census record, if your child was born on or before April 1st, they're supposed to be in the census record. Now, if someone passes away between the timing of this video and April 1st, they are still supposed to be counted as of April 1st. There's more information in case I got things confused, and I will drop a link to the official rules of the census. Now, did you know that every census since pretty much the beginning of the U.S. Census records has instructions? And so when in doubt, go to the instructions in order to figure out who was supposed to be counted. So let's talk a little bit about who was supposed to be counted and, more importantly, where they're supposed to be counted. Now, you are supposed to be counted where you live most of the time. 2020 is going to be very interesting because you have a lot of people who are moving to places where they don't quite live most of the time so they can shelter in place. Yeah, so college students, there are things where college students, if they live away from home, they're supposed to be counted there. But their parents might actually count them at home and things get a little bit confusing. Let's see. I also want to go back for a second to this enumeration date. So you are supposed to count yourself at the place where you are living and sleeping most of the time as of April 1st. So as of April Fool's Day, where do you sleep most of the time? And yes, so Tommy brought up there's floaters. So there are rules about what if you don't have a home? How do you get counted? What if you are in transition? If you are moving, according to the instructions, if you have moved into your new place of residence before April 1st, you count yourself in the new place. If you are in transition and you haven't quite moved into the new place, then you count yourself where you were. But that's only if you aren't completely like sold your house in one place and have bought your house, but you're really between the two places, then you count yourself where you're living. It gets really confusing. And by saying all of this, I'm going to always direct you to the instructions from the census record. Hey, Maria, glad you're here. And Ascertain, glad you're here. People have two homes. Yes, this is the point. Like a home in New Jersey and a home in Florida. Yes, there are instructions because we had a lot of snowbirds when we lived in Iowa. So they would go to Arizona for the winter and they would come back to Iowa for the nice summers, which were really just a long spring in Iowa. So the instructions tend to be, if I'm not mistaken, we can all correct me later, or as all genealogists say, go back to the census instructions. It is my understanding that people who are floater are supposed to count themselves to where they are on April 1st. So the important thing is to always go back into the instructions. But something that I wanted to point out is, if we're supposed to count everyone, do you count the people who aren't related to you living in your home? Yeah. And think about it in the past. Our ancestors often had boarders. They had people who were servants and lived in their homes. There's a lot of people who were not really their relatives who were in their homes. And so it was important that we count everyone where they reside most of the time on April 1st in that local place. So you're supposed to count roommates, young children, newborns, and anyone who's renting a space in your home. If someone is staying in your home on April 1st and has no usual home elsewhere, then you're supposed to count them in your home. So fascinating things to go and check out. But what happens if you're living, like you're an American citizen and you're not living in America at the time of the census record? What are you supposed to do? Hey, Max, glad to have you there. So now this has been fascinating for me as a genealogist as I was researching Geraldine Rang. She's someone I talked about here on this channel quite a bit. So Geraldine Rang in 1930 and 1940, she is in the census records. She's still an American citizen. Why was she counted? Well, that comes back to some of the rules about foreign American citizens living outside of the country. If you're working for the government or are in the military, you're going to have special census forms and you're going to be counted. But in the case of Geraldine Rang and many other people who are expats living abroad, you don't get counted. And so it's really frustrating as a research to go, where the heck is Geraldine Rang in 1930 and 1940? Because she shows up in Hidalgo County, Texas in 1975. It's not like she died, although that's sometimes our assumption. So be careful about the assumptions you make, because if you have American citizens living abroad, they're not counted. So if you want more guidance on who should be counted, how should be counted, if you're living in a roommate situation, who's considered head of household, be sure to go ahead and check these census instructions. Let's talk about a couple other things that I thought was interesting. So I did cover the where to talk about most of the time. Oh, I know what I wanted to pay attention to and focus in on. Let's go back here to the PIP. Give me just a second to switch my slide. There we go. So start asking some questions. Now, many of you have said, hey, why are there so few questions on this census record? I have to agree with you. So one of the questions, as I alluded to at the beginning, that is taken off the census record, and that's because the Supreme Court decided it was unconstitutional, was the status of citizenship. As a genealogist, I disagree with that decision. And it's okay to be controversial, and it's okay to have a differing opinion of the Supreme Court. But the citizenship question just points us to more records and helps us identify the difference between this John Smith and this John Smith from England. So I'm a little frustrated with them about that. There are some really good things that they have changed, and that is that they brought in the races, how you can identify your race. I saw Filipino, which is something that seems fairly, a new thing. It definitely wasn't there 1930 and on to 1790. You had very limited race designations. And so I do like that we are broadening your options there. I do like that there are more options on how you're related to the head of household. For some of us some of our viewers who are in the LGBTQ community, you're going to like the option to identify that you're in the home with your same-sex partner and things of that nature. Now, gender is still male and female, and that's something we can fight about for the 2030 census, but there is a number of great information that they're gathering there or expanding the options for us. One other thing that I want to talk to you before I get to the questions, this is just a quick video about the census records, but one of the things that I want to talk to you about is, have you taken the time to, even though you might have filled it online, make a copy of your answers? Think about that. So, the census information that we fill out today will not be open to the public for 72 years. So, your descendants will want to know what your answers were. So, even if you printed off or used the online form to fill out the census record, you can print off a census form and then just stick it with your vital records, your important documents, to pass that on so that people don't need to track down your census information and not be able to access it for 72 years. Yep, PDF. Oh, good. June, you took a screenshot of that. Smart girl. So I wanted to fill out the form, but not online. Any thoughts on that? I wanted to fill out the form and not online. Oh yeah, June was telling you, Maria, that you can print off the PDF and then you've got it good. Now, what happens if you don't get the census record completed in this short amount of time? Well, that's when the census staff will go and try to track people down. And this is when they're going to try to track down the people who are don't have homes, like homeless people who are living in various institutions and stuff like that. So census workers will go and try to track down anybody who hasn't responded by the deadline. So make sure you respond by the deadline. How do you find the census from the 1700s and the 1800s? Oh, that is a fantastic question. I'm glad you asked. So you can access the census records for the United States for free, and this is a good word, on Ancestry.com, on Family Search. I believe it is also free on MyHeritage and Find My Past. So you should be able to access that. If you're looking for the Canadian census record, it's the Canadian Archive. They have the census records, although some platforms are now starting to be able to have that on there. But when I was researching my Ontario Canadians, I had to go to the Library Archives of Canada. Greg, if you know the link, could you drop that in? Otherwise, I'll find it after the stream is over. But yeah, for English census records, you're going to want to look at Find My Past. They have census records. And outside of the country, I'm not entirely sure because I don't research outside of the country. I know they exist, but I haven't had an opportunity to research. The Irish Census. Yes, that's going to be on Find My Past. So you'll need a subscription to Find My Past. Yeah, the Irish Census records. And then look for sales, because I know that they were just doing, for St. Patrick's Day, they just had a free Irish collection that you could research over at Find My Past. So if you're a little tight on money, go ahead and look for the free weekends for those records, but go to Find My Past. Thanks, Greg. Glad you're on it. Okay, question. How do the hints on various genealogy sites identify women and children's names if in the early census it only reflects tally marks, often in age categories? Okay. I have an entire workshop called How Navigating the Pre-1850 Census Records with Care. So most databases will not put a name to those records. They will only identify the head of household and then tell you the ages and the number of people in that age range and gender classification when you're searching the records. So how do you know that your ancestor is actually in the 1790 to 1840 census records, what we call the ticks and tallies? Well, this is when you get into more advanced research, and it's also the time when you don't rely solely on census records. This is when you're going to look for city directories, especially beginning around 1830 in many large urban populations, not so much in the rural areas, but you never know. Always look. You're going to look for church records, newspapers, land records, probate records. You're going to try to piece together the family and then compare it to the ticks and tallies to see who may or may not have lined up. But in my workshop, which many of you should ask your local genealogy societies or national genealogy conferences to invite me to share on, in that class, I talk about the fact that Abe Lincoln goes kind of missing in 1840. And what happens is people aren't where they're supposed to be at the time the enumeration is taking place. They're hidden in different homes in your heart. It's very difficult to say, oh, yes, this is a child of this head of household. There's a lot of factors that go to 1790 to 1840 census records. You just do your best guess and build a case with additional records beyond just the census records to try to essablish that family. I hope that answers your question. That's a fabulous question. So glad you're here to ask that, Charlene. Kat Morris asked something about an ethnicity from Ancestry. Maria, I'm not sure. Kat. Was that a question or are you just... I'm not seeing anything from Kat Morris. Well, too. Okay, so... I don't need to explain some of the quirks. Yeah, absolutely. There are Jason was saying he just saw an ad explaining some of the quirks of who to count in the household. Yeah, there's great ads, but honestly, just go to the census record, census.gov, and it will answer all of your questions. Let me go ahead and put this PDF in the link as well. That tells you who to count, how to count, all that other stuff. But yeah, so what questions did you think? Some of you had said, gosh, it was really, really brief. What questions did you think should have been on this 2020 census records and weren't? So we know that your relationship to the head of household is there. We know that your citizenship status is not on there. I'm blanking out. Oh, your ethnicity is on there. What else? Yes. So, Ms. Cybervamp, yes, the public will not have access to any census records for 72 years in the United States. Now, you may think, gosh, that's a long time, but in the UK and Ireland and Canada, actually, let me not say Canada, no, in England, 100 years. So we get it a few years earlier. But yeah, you definitely want to take a copy of your census answers and put it into your important documents. And the other thing is, so that reminds me, in 2022, we get access to the 1950 census record. I'm really excited about that because my mom will be on that census record. My dad will be on that census record. A lot of the older generation, so my parents, cousins and stuff, they're going to be on that 1950 census, and I'm really excited about the details I'll be able to see there. Why is Ancestry DNA so dear, Max? I'm not quite sure what your question is there, so if you can expand on it, I'll be happy to do my best to answer it. Yeah. Jason, you signed up to be an enumerator. Awesome. Occupation. Oh, good. We haven't filled ours out yet, and it's going to be fun because we have 3 generations in our home. My mother and father-in-law live with us, but if you asked where did they live most of the time before January, they were living in Hanoi, Vietnam, so they would not have been counted. But because they came back to the U.S. in January and they're living with us full time until they get to go on another mission trip when everything lifts, then they're going to be off in yonder. So their plan was not to be here on April 1st so they could go serve another mission trip, but that didn't quite work out. Oh, okay. Good. Why does it cost so much to buy an ancestor DNA test? Well, if you tried to buy a test a couple of years ago, it was $129, and so now it's about $79 to $49. It's a couple of things to keep in mind. It's not just a test. I mean, we're paying for the materials, then you're paying for the processing, and then you're paying for the database and for the tools that you get. You get access to the ancestry through lines, you get access to DNA matching, and that takes a lot of server capacity in order to match that stuff up. You also have color coding. I'm mentioning all of these. I'm going to have to make a big long list in the description, so be sure to check those all out. But yeah, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for this company to utilize their technology, keep their servers going, develop new matching technology, and so on and so forth. So it actually is pretty cheap. But if you're only concerned about ethnicity, just wait for it to be a $39 sale and go for it. Here at Family History Fanatics, we don't really care about the ethnicity results because they're hit or miss of whether they're all that accurate. We care about genetic genealogy, matching and finding new cousins, new relatives. Last week, we interviewed Larry Jones from DNA Family Tree, and he talked about the skeletons that we open up when we do all of this. But we're really after finding people rather than trying to establish our ethnicity. So yeah, I could see if that's all you're trying to do, that would be expensive. But if you're trying to connect to new relatives or be a bridge for others who are trying to research their ancestors, like adoptees who don't know anything about their biological lineage, yeah, the price is well worth the value. Okay. Oh, so you said occupation was not included. I am so sorry. I missed that one. I thought I looked over and saw occupation. I feel like we're going backwards in times in many situations with this 2020 census, that we're not providing those biographical details. So I guess it just behooves us to write our personal history and pass that on, because that's the only way the future is going to know about us. Yes, so Tommy, yeah, we can connect our DNA matches to our tree. That's the through lines. That's the through lines I was talking about. Now, it's not perfect. Be sure you go check our videos about through lines and the benefits and the pitfalls of through lines. But yeah, that is a really great feature when you put your tree. Your tree has to be public or private but searchable, as well as your matches have to do the same thing. And then when you do, then you can utilize your trees. Now, keep in mind, adoptees aren't going to benefit from that because they don't have a tree to match. But eventually they can see people's trees, see how they're related, and maybe able to make some sense of what their heritage is from. So always add a tree to your DNA test. And Ancestry is going to keep your living people private. We just really care about your deceased grandparents and great-grandparents to try to make these connections. So if you do take a DNA test, put at least 3 to 4 generations of your direct ancestors on the tree so we can start figuring out how people are related. That'd be great. Separate from through lines. Oh, what do you mean then? We can connect our DNA matches to our tree. Well, yeah. I'm not exactly sure, Tommy, what you're indicating. I mean, yes, you can connect your tree, your DNA to someone on a tree. And then outside on your DNA match list, they'll look for common ancestors or things of that nature. So yeah. Oh, there's a new feature. Go figure. A new feature. Okay. So Fergal lives in Ireland. In the houses, they slipped in on the day specified, no matter where you live. See, that simplifies things, doesn't it? But it could also, so Ireland, as she was saying in the chat, you're supposed to count people on where they were the day of the census and where they slept. And that becomes kind of confusing because let's say you're traveling and you're in a hotel that night. Well, your ancestors aren't going to know that you were a transport pilot and you just happened to be in Denver, but you're typically in Houston. And it causes a lot of confusion as genealogists. It simplifies counting, but it confuses people. Plus, also, the enumeration is based on people residing so that you have representation for where you live and you reside in order to have House of Representative individuals and senators, well, you get 2 senators, but you get the idea. The representation is based on where people live, and so if a lot of people are only counted on the day where they lived in that one particular spot, but they're usually living everywhere else, it does make that representation quite unequal, and so that's why there's, it's not straightforward, but it does have roots and why it makes sense. Okay. Not sure. Okay. Okay. I'm going to have to figure out what this new technology is. So thank you guys so much. So it has been a little bit longer than our planned live stream. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope that you will take the time to hit the like button if you enjoyed our streams. If you like our new background, you can also tell me what you're loving in there in the comment section or in the chat before we close it all out. Let me go ahead and close things out for those who are watching the replay. See, this is me trying to learn how to do things. Oh, there we go. All right, so if you want to learn more about census records, be sure to click our playlist up at the top. And if you want to see our latest video, be sure to click the one on the bottom. All right, that's a wrap, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here. Tomorrow is Thursday, so it is a recorded video at 3 p.m. Friday will be another live stream. That one's going to talk about writing. And then Saturday, Andy will be here to talk all things genealogy. And I guess I'm going to have to, but it's a Q&A session. So bring your questions and keep him busy. If you've commented on any of his videos in the last month or so, we're going to also play comment catch up. So he's going to be in the hot seat for a little bit on Saturday. Remember, all of our videos are going live at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central, because that's where we live. And what is that? GMT -5. Yeah, the time changed. It's no longer GMT.